It's even more than a month now that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu mounted the saddle as first president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The 1 month of President Bola Tinubu's administration in office has been marked by pragmatic solutions and ideas, decisive decisions, and breathtaking actions at a fast pace. However, mixed reactions have trailed his famous declaration of subsidy removal at his inauguration, while some have nicknamed him Baba Go Fast. Yes, Mr. Abiodun Kayode Ali is an economist and tax manager. He's with PricewaterhouseCoopers and is a friend of the house. He joins me to discourse more about what President Tinubu has done economically in 1 month. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for your time on the show.
Thank you for having me, Tolu. It's good to be back on your show.
Yeah, so after some time, well, now and it's virtual now, you're not, but it looks very good. Thank you so much for this. So first, I will ask you, in your assessment, many have said bold steps, pragmatic steps, commendations from here and there. How bold do you think these steps are to you, and what impact do you expect? Short, medium, and long term?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Tolu. So indeed, they are very bold steps, given the fact that previous administrations have not been able to deal with some of these policy reforms that have been advised by analysts, international organizations, right? So I think it was actually a bold move. And like the president said, it was something that he had to do immediately in order to avoid facing delays down the line. So I think in that regard, it's something very bold, and it's something that's been welcomed by the international community. We've seen different organizations as well as different heads of states giving the president kudos with respect to this move. Now, with respect to its impact, the short term, I'm sure that these are things that you've seen. You've seen situations whereby prices have gone up, right? We've seen prices of food items, prices of commodities, even transport costs, which is the direct impact. It's more than doubled. In some situations, it's even tripled, right? So we've seen prices go up. The expectation in the medium term is that these prices would stabilize, and they would only stabilize in the medium and long term if appropriate intervention plans are kept in place. Now, if you consider the product, the impact of the product, the PMS itself, the removal of the subsidy, it's not like individuals are actually going after the product because they need the product for its use, for itself rather, but because of what it helps with. And those two critical things are transport and power. So as long as key infrastructures are put in place with the savings, we expect that over the medium and long term, things will begin to normalize. And so same for other policies that have been put in place, such as the unification of the exchange rate, which I'm sure we're going to talk more on as we progress.
Let's move on now to I was talking earlier about balance of trade. That's when we talk about the FX thing and all that relates to that. But at the moment, some will say that they expect a drop in the exchange rates, of course, looking at this move. Now, what sort of transition period do you think we would have to go through before we get to that point? Availability, liquidity being available is also on the other side. How can we get more FX, making it more available? And when do you think we'll start to see the impact of this very policy on FX? Let's stay on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the FX policy, I think it's one of the initiatives or one of the things that was done by the president, which everyone is happy about, right? And its advantages are numerous, like the last speaker said, with respect to rent seeking and arbitrage, which had been the order of the day in previous administrations, given the fact that the premium between the parallel rate and the official rate was quite high, and in fact, one of the highest in the world, according to the World Bank report. So, if you consider some of these things have been resolved, it was only expected that very soon you won't see much of this rent-seeking behaviors. So, at what point in time would it begin to stabilize, like you rightly asked? So, one thing is important, which the president has done, is the fact that he has instilled confidence in local investors as well as in foreign investors, confidence in the markets generally. Now, you see a lot of people hoarding most of these forex, right? Most of these foreign currencies, they've been hoarding it because of the store of value that it had. Now, with the liberalization of the FX market, we've even seen deposit money banks put in place certain systems whereby you can begin to trade at a reasonable rate. The RT200 scheme that was introduced, I think, early last year, it was supposed to incentivize exporters to bring in their FX from their exports, right? Bring it to the market for, I think, an incentive of about 65 naira. Even though they being given that 65 naira, you still had a high premium between what was obtainable in the official and parallel market rate. And it wasn't reasonable to them to bring in that FX through the official windows, right? Same for a lot of diaspora remittances. You might be surprised to hear that there are actually some foreigners, some of our brothers in the diaspora who are actually still not sending their money, repatriating their money through official channels. They would rather still take it through the parallel window, right? But now that this has been unified, there is more grounds to see an increased inflow of their remittances. Those are some of the things that this unification will do. So in the medium term, you will begin to see that stability. Then also, I think one key thing is critical, just like the last speaker said. One key thing has to do with production, manufacturing. Are we able to produce and consume what we produce? Are we able to also export? We have to look away from oil exports. We have to look into non-oil exports. As long as we're able to do a lot of manufacturing, a lot of exports, and they meet global and international standards, we will see a situation whereby our reserves will begin to increase, and there will be available FX for a lot of people who are in need of them. So I think in the medium and in the long term, it's quite key that we pay attention to production. And in order to do that, you must pay attention to critical infrastructure, because production only takes place with good infrastructure, right? That's when it's more convenient. So I think in the medium term, in the long term, as long as the government is able to invest in these critical infrastructures, right, such as roads, such as power and electricity, I think to a reasonable extent we can help in terms of promoting non-oil export. Then also, if we can deal with the issues of security that has affected our crude oil production, I think to a reasonable extent we will begin to see lots of inflow of dollars and things will begin to stabilize. There are different agencies that have actually said, like the Bank of America has actually said that the Naira is currently being undervalued, right? They are saying a price of about 680 Naira before the end of the year. And there are also other agencies that see something like 685. So I think it will stabilize and you begin to see the Naira appreciate as we go towards the end of the year.
Great stuff. Let's now go to this report from the World Bank. We cannot ignore whatever comes from the likes of IMF and World Bank. This report is Nigeria's development update, seizing the opportunity. What is the opportunity we are seizing here? Can you take us through or do like an overview of this report? Because it touches on some of what we've already spoken about in this discussion, but straight from World Bank, what really is the message?
Okay, thank you. That's a very interesting report that was released last week, Tuesday. Okay, so what the World Bank was doing was to first of all join other international organizations and analysts who have required that Nigeria deal with the subsidy issue. What the World Bank did was to first give kudos, right, to the president in making those historical reforms with respect to the removal of the subsidy. And the reason why they did that was because, Nigeria's, in terms of our debt has actually been on the high, right? So they made reference to some of our challenges in terms of the high fiscal deficits we've been running by looking at periods such as 2014, 2011, when our fiscal deficit was somewhere within the range of 800 billion, and comparing it to current times where our fiscal deficit is somewhere within the range of 10 trillion, right? So what they simply were pointing out is that Nigeria has been able to avoid that fiscal cliff by taking this bold move. Then some other things that they were discussing that Nigeria could do alongside some of these policy reforms that have been taken by the present administration is also to consider giving a kind of targeted intervention, right, to the vulnerable and the poor. Now, the reason why they are stating that is quite obvious is because, the impact of this subsidy removal, what it will do is that it will make inflation go up, right? And you will see a situation whereby this particular inflation is going to throw about 7 million people below the poverty line. So the World Bank simply estimated that currently, if you look at the situation of Nigeria as at May 2023, the World Bank estimated that Nigeria has 93 million people below the poverty line. And it's saying that if nothing is done with respect to assisting the poor and the vulnerable, this figure is going to move from 93 million to 100 million before the end of the year. So it kind of gives that advice. And some of the things that we advised were giving conditional cash transfers, which I personally have an issue with, because if you think about it, how much are you going to give to the poor and the vulnerable in these present times that will be sufficient for them, right? I don't think that will go far. And do we have records, right, of those who are going to be highly hit by these policies? I don't think we have that much information and data. So some of the other things that the World Bank touched on had to do with addressing issues on our policies. Some of the policies it looks at are the monetary policy, the trade policy, the fiscal policy, as well as the FX policy. So a lot of things were said with respect to trade, for instance, doing a lot in removing regulatory bottlenecks, which have actually made it very difficult for producers to export goods and also import items. If you look at the situation at the ports, you've heard of different reports talking about the cost of transporting items from the ports to the inlands, and these costs being even higher compared to you getting them from the port to overseas, other countries of the world, right? So he talked about addressing some of these challenges, removing these regulatory bottlenecks in such a way that it promotes trade, investment, and growth, and also trying to ensure that there is price stability in some of the things we do, monetary policy. So these are some of the things it touches on. I think some of the, it also recommended some advice. Some of the advice have to do with introducing VAT on petroleum products. Some of them have to do with recognizing input VAT on services and things like that. So in a nutshell, what the World Bank report is simply saying is that Nigeria is actually treading on the right path, but more needs to be done in order not to make the situation go worse. That's in a nutshell what the World Bank report was saying.
Interesting analysis there, I must say. But let's talk about money saved from subsidy removal. They are saying that it should be spent on some targeted sectors. Can you shed more light around that?
Yes, thank you for that question. So, given the fact that it's projected that about 3.9 trillion is going to be saved from the subsidy removal, they gave a kind of scenario, they analyzed two scenarios. Out of that 3.9 trillion, the NNPC says it's being owed about 2.8 trillion, right? So they are looking at a situation whereby if the federal government eventually pays back some of those monies, that subsidies that are being owed to the NNPC, it will be left with about 1.1 trillion, right? And if it doesn't pay, it still has the 3.9 trillion. And some of the critical areas where those monies need to be rechanneled, according to the report, has to do with things like critical human infrastructure. By critical human infrastructure, we're talking about health, and we're talking about education. If you look at our budget, our 2023 budget, right, it's been estimated that just below 10% is what is being spent on education and health. This is below the standard benchmark of 15%, right? So these areas, if you can channel these spendings to these areas, as well as also infrastructure that will alleviate the situation of the poor. These are some of the recommendations that are being given. And I think it's quite important. One addition I will make is that it's quite important that the government actually does a lot with respect to this intervention at this point in time and early. The reason why I said early is because we've seen a lot of people carrying out cost-cutting measures, such as walking long distances or avoiding eating 3 square meals as a result of cost going up. So it's quite important that government channels these monies into these sorts of things: road infrastructure, health, and education. Very important. Otherwise, things can degenerate into a worse situation. These are some of the things that are being recommended there.
Before I let you go, the World Bank is also saying that inflation is likely to hit 25% before the end of 2023. I'm looking at that and looking at what the impact would be. Does that mean that more Nigerians will get poorer? How would that really affect us practically? You're an economist. Can you break it down for us?
Yeah, that's quite true. That's quite true. According to the World Bank, once again, they believe that the inflation is going to take 7 million people. It's going to take several million people below the poverty line. Now, the issue is that definitely, yes, inflation will make people poorer because it simply means that your disposable income, right, or your take-home pay is not taking you home, right? There is a limit to what your disposable income can afford, given the fact that your wages and salaries are not rising proportionately, right? So you've seen a situation whereby food inflation is somewhere around 24%. I'm sure, Tolu, you go to the market, right? The prices at which you got things previously 2 months back, it's not the same price at which you get things, right? Even transporting yourself, which is quite key, right? Not everyone has the luxury of working from home. People still have to go about their business. So transport is key to productivity. So definitely a lot of people will end up being poorer, right? That's exactly what it's going to do. So it's quite key that government is able to address some of these areas. That's exactly what inflation will do. So it's quite important that we tackle the structural issues that give rise to Nigeria's inflation, which has nothing to do, which doesn't have much to do with the monetary policy tools that we've been seeing. So those are my few takes on the inflation.
All right, there. I think it's a good way to live it. It's quite worrisome, but we'll keep pushing. We'll keep pushing on. Now, before I let you go, something just came up to my mind, and talking about reforms now, structural reforms now in particular. Many say that's part of the issue that we face as a country. Now, what sort of monetary policies, what sort of fiscal policies do you expect in the coming months? We expect the ministerial list to be out anytime soon. So let's just wrap up on that note so that they can consolidate on all that the president has started with.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, to a very good question. I think one of the things that needs to be done is at this point in time, there needs to be a halt to the monetary policy rate hike. There needs to be a halt because it's actually impacting on the cost of doing business. Also, the ways and means financing, that needs to stop, right? That needs to stop because it also has an impact on inflation in the sense that the CBN is actually lending money to the government for not carrying out any productive activity. And then also with respect to fiscal reforms, I think it's quite key that ministries, departments, and agencies align with the vision and the movement of the current president, right? Because if these MDAs are not aligned with the vision, what will happen is that they will act as bottlenecks, right, to that vision, and things will not be done, right? It could be very frustrating, and this could actually give a negative signal, especially to foreign investors who want to come and do business in Nigeria. So I think in those areas, it's quite key. Also, with respect to critical infrastructures, like I said, it's quite important that there is a lot of investment there. And security, I think security is a big issue. It's also a big concern. As long as security is being dealt with, foreign investors can come into the country, and also there can be free movement of items within the country. So I think these are a few key areas that need to be addressed shortly.
Interesting stuff there. I must thank you so much for your time. It's been nice chatting with you, Mr. Biodun Kayode Ali. He is an economist and tax manager with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you so much and do have a great week.
Thank you, Tolu. Have a wonderful week as well.